Chris, I'm very excited and happy we have another monthly dragon on
We
the
absolutely do.
board. So, what nice game have you found for us this time?
Well, we have got a Hungarian dragon. We have a Hungarian dragon, and I'm going to attempt to ask a question which I feel might be on lots of people's minds at the moment. I'm not sure I'm going to answer it very well, but at least I try and do my best. And it's very similar to a question, Anna, that you once asked me.
Oh,
I'm going to get there. Okay.
all right.
So let's just kick off straight away. We have our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Sicilian dragon, and particular here, after bishop to e3, black plays knight c6, which is already an indicator that something might be afoot, because otherwise bishop g7 would be the prioritized move. It doesn't matter actually from a black point of view, because they can still do bishop g7 next. But the point is, after f3, we have this move h5, which is characteristic of the so-called Hungarian dragon.
And not only that, this game was played in Budapest.
Correct.
Tja,
Yeah,
what,
correct.
I mean, you couldn't have picked it any better. Yeah, so H5 getting more and more popular. You're still
You're,
mixed about it a bit, but
is there some sort of quiz on the capital cities around the world?
yes.
I'll, I'll try. I'll bring next week. Everyone will be disappointed when I
The,
bring the London system to you guys.
yeah, what's the capital though? But okay.
Right. So here we go. So we've got H5. Now, a question which has come our way is, or a request is, I would really like to see Black's plan of attack in the Hungarian Dragon against White's short castling with the move H3 or H4. So we're talking about these type moves. Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to bear that in mind
Okay.
as I continue throughout the session.
It's a very good question. I would love to know this too, because more and more people are going kingside, and I dislike it too.
Right. Okay. And that's why I bring you back to when the subscribers, the readers, the viewers may not even know this, is because you asked me, Chris, what do I do in the classical variation when White castles kingside? How can I attack their king?
I
Do you
should.
remember asking me that question?
I think 100 times.
Do you remember how I replied?
You don't.
You, right, you don't. Absolutely correct. See, that's not an answer that
Yeah,
people are going to
that's
like.
I don't like that answer, but yeah, I mean,
So,
you are the expert for sure, and I think I get your point, obviously.
now, so my point is, in general, the idea is if we have a castling king side thing, more often than not, Black's action is going to lie on the queen side of the board. In particular, utilizing the c4 square, maybe trying to make a break with pawn to d5, and definitely making the most of the half open c file,
Hmm.
potentially with expansion going on the queen side, a kind of minority attack situation to attack those white pawns and basically triumph more on the queen side than on the king side. Now, there may be slight exceptions where white gets a bit too fruity on the king side, creates weaknesses, and we can change direction, if you like. And one of my favorite little variations is actually against the G3, the fianchetto system,
Hmm.
where in fact, after knight to c6 challenging this knight here, White's idea is to drop back and continue with their fianchetto. And then later in the day, they might want to try and occupy this d5 square. Sure, it'd be handy if we could get a knight in here pretty quickly, but we can't get it quite there yet. So what we do is bishop d7 is an option. Again, bishop g7, castles kingside, rook b8, b5, b4. Very sensible plan. But we do have an additional option here of playing this move and this move, which has the aim of, if white castles, then we have a little idea of bishop h3, h5, h4, and giving white a taste of their own medicine, if you like.
Exactly, turning the
Now that sort
tables.
of thing undoubtedly would be right up your street, I
A
would
hundred
imagine.
percent. I love
Ah,
it. I always want to play it. Yeah.
brilliant, excellent. So now let's come back to the Hungarian dragon.
Hmm.
And I'm also going to get a little bit theoretical just to show you where we stand at this moment. Although what comes in our main game today is something at the latest attempt by white. So essentially here, the whole plan, if you remember about the Hungarian Dragon, is that black is going to swap knights if white has played queen d2 and then go bishop h6.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than placing the dragon on its normal g7 square, it's going to come to h6 to hassle the queen. So let's take a look then, for example, at queen d2 immediately, which doesn't take place in this particular game. The idea is knight takes, knight, bishop takes, and then bishop h6.
Mm-hmm.
So from white's perspective here, they kind of have a little choice of things to do. They can either move the attacked queen straight away, or they can drop the bishop back to exchange off the bishops anyhow, or they can play bishop b5 check. Now, you may remember, and this is the point, I actually, look at the things that I do for our little sessions. I looked back at the two videos which you can find on YouTube, of course, on our original Hungarian Dragon, then there was a Hungarian Dragon deviation. And actually, I mean, I don't like looking back at my videos because I always think I'm better looking than I really am, evidently, or something. But when I go back and look at them, I thought actually the content was pretty good, and I included a couple of the main plans which you still deploy, whether or not this h3 and h4 question is going to come up. So, for example, you may remember, I'm going to speed through it because, again, this was a little side variation. I'm referring to the main game with Richard Rapport, which is, he was one of the kind of main guys that played this at the beginning. And the idea, the key idea in this particular situation here is that what's going to happen is white is looking for a situation whereby they can swap off light square bishops, take this guy here, and then have a very good knight on a wonderful outpost against the dragon bishop.
Mm-hmm.
So black should not allow that to happen. And consequently, this bishop goes to the square c6 and says, if you want to swap off the bishops, you have to give me the chance to have a pawn on c6, such that you can't have an outpost on d5 for your knight. So, and in these sort of systems, white does castle. And so if I can remind you how this game went. So we have a situation whereby black has got the two bishops, and they've got the dragon bishop, but of course they've got a lousy looking pawn here on d6. And this is an outpost. But as I've just mentioned, we are not planning on swapping that bishop. We will take this knight when it comes in here. And in this particular game, which to be fair, it was a blitz game, but it brought a brilliant, involving two super high rated players. And I'm just going to show you how it went. We had the situation, this might ring a bell, where it seemed to be all hands to the pump at the moment to defend this pawn. But I'm going to show you how. Oh, yeah. I'm going to show you how we attacked. And in this particular game,
oops,
the key point, yeah, I remember you pointed, we had this little discussion where you said, that's the only square available for the
square.
queen.
You don't say so, Arnie.
Right. But the idea was in this game, and it's the same sort of structure here, black was able to attack this pawn on h2, courtesy here of, if we can see it in a second, queen h4 and the on queen h3. And the idea was, so the simple plan essentially is for us to eliminate that and put the bishop on f4, and there's going to be big trouble there on h2. If white has to go h3, then there's a massive hole for us to slip our queen into, for example. So it's all about attacking those squares here, and this bishop is going to get the opportunity to come to f4. So here in the game, white played g3 to regain some dark square control, queen h3, and now what happened is when we took here, we were able to do h4 because this pawn was now weakened as a result of white playing g3. And then particularly sweet was this wonderful move, bishop f played in the game, because of course, if pawn takes bishop, we have queen takes f3 check, rook blocks, and then pawn to h3. And this was really nice. Let me just show you the end of this game. We ganged up, and then there was a wonderful possibility that we didn't do of queen takes g2 check and winning down the h file. But he actually won in another nice way. He won in another nice way as well, to be fair. Take c3. This is how the game went after a couple of checks. He still sacrificed his queen and then got to win via this lovely move. So that was actually the original game that caught my eye in this system, I think. And it's just a very good idea of how to attack the king when it's castled on the king side, if they've conceded that dark square bishop that enables us to get it to f4. So you can say, well, come on, that's not going to happen in one of my games. And you're probably right, actually. But let's head back a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump back quite a long way. So here we have it, a little reminder. So if we have this situation here, queen d2 takes bishop h6, that was with the move bishop b5. Now let's say what happens if the queen goes to f2. Well, if the queen goes to f2, we already know that white's not going to be able to castle queenside because of the bishop on h6. But then we have a simple plan, such as ultimately, well, this king f8 maneuver, you were a fan of this.
Yes.
With the idea of putting the king on g7, whilst there's still potential for action on the h file with the pawn on h5. But again, key is that we'll have this move e5 here at the very least to budge that bishop. And if these pieces get swapped off, what ultimately might happen is we could have a trade of queens on c5. The king could come back out to e7. We're not going to give checkmate to the white king, but because light square bishop pawns on dark squares and king nicely centralized, it's going to be absolutely fine. That type of end game. So there we go there. Now, if again we head back. So this is basically what I'm trying to say. We're not always going to be able to get a raging attack against the king. So here we go once again. I want to go over this just slowly so people are understanding the kind of options available. And of course we have then we have the possibility of white just saying, okay, let's swap off the bishops now. And still, I wouldn't be afraid of this check on b5 because we can do king f8 to g7. And if bishop to d3, again, I just think a very simple plan of essentially being able to play queen c5 if we wanted to here. Swap off the queens, and then we can do a little bit of expansion ultimately on the queen side with the A and the B pawn to try and get at that c2 pawn. It's not going to be about an attack on the king side. Now,
I gotcha. But I need to ask you one quick question for this.
Go for it.
So if you're the attacking player like myself, and I love to attack, and of course there are situations where you just cannot attack. It's just there's an opening and you cannot attack.
Yeah.
Can you give me an advice?
What you mean, can I clarify?
Yes.
What you mean is you cannot attack the king.
Yes, correct. Of course. That is right. Yeah. Let me be precise for that. How can you give me an advice how to change my mindset that I have to say goodbye to not attacking the king immediately instead of just like pushing pawns forward and being like a total
Well, first
idiot,
of all, it's a bit like someone that says, it's a little bit like someone that says, no, I don't study endgames. Why not? I never get them before. I plan on winning in the opening and the middle game, basically. Why should I bother? And what would you say to them?
Yeah.
You would say to them, well, you need to improve your all-round game. You need to learn to be able to good at openings, middle games. You need to be good at end games. You need to be able to attack. You need to be able to defend.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have a positional game to your style, and you need to be able to do attacking.
That's a perfect answer.
Do it all. So, and that's exactly the case here. And I tell you one, I'm sure if you think about it, you will have had a game where you've castled kingside and your queen side feels under pressure.
Yes.
Yeah. And they are attacking you. They are attacking you there. And I bet you've not said, oh, there's no problems. My king's on the other side of the ball. Yeah. So you just have to reverse yourself in that situation and think, if they win a pawn over there and get a new queen, it won't be long before my king will be feeling the heat. So that, it's just the way. It's a bit like the King's Indians. I mean, the King's Indian, the classical setup, of course, is where you see when you get that blocked situation with e4 and d5 and c4, black's razzing their f pawn down the board, f5, f4, g5, h5, and white's doing b4, c5, and you think, wait, what's the point? Black's attacking the white king, white is attacking. Well, there's nothing on that side of the ball. What's he doing? Well, you soon find out. If your attack fails to deliver checkmate as black, you soon find out what that white play is all about over there. Now, fortunately, myself, I don't play the King's Indian because I don't like getting a duff bishop. But there are plenty of good King's Indian players out there that have delivered checkmate, and there are plenty it's gone horribly wrong, and then they've lost on the queen side. So basically, you need a bit of variety to your game.
Good.
Yeah?
Good
but it
answer.
doesn't
Thank you. Yeah.
change your style in general. You can still be an aggressive player.
Hmm.
You just have to accept that if you're just a one-trick pony, you're going to be found
That's
out.
that's my second nickname in high school, but yeah.
Oh, one-trick pony.
Just
Okay,
kidding, obviously, but yeah.
okay, brilliant. Now, so late and more recent times, White, instead of going Queen D2, has been playing the move Bishop C4, as if to say, I'm going to develop my bishop. And I'm not putting my queen yet on D2 because of that whole business about trading knights and Bishop H6. And I'm keeping my options open. I might castle on the king side. I might castle on the queen side. But of course, now Black does have the option to go Bishop G7, but we have a little bit of cat and mouse still, just Bishop D7, saying that's useful to me. If you go Queen D2, of course, here, then we're still going to have the whole idea of trading here. And there was, again, here would have the same old situation. If White nudged the queen over to F2, then we'd have Queen A5, and soon we'd be able to play this move E5. And guess what? Trade of bishops, rook c8, the queen probably coming to c5 to swap off the queens. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who say, boo hiss, why are you swapping off the queens? How can I give checkmate? But the whole idea is quite possibly if we've got one or two holes over here, White is maybe possibly the chance that might be able to attack you. And as I have just mentioned, whichever way we took here with the rook, keeping the c-file action open, or with the d-pawn, looking to hunt down this bishop, either way, our king will be able to stay probably on e7, closer to the center to the white king, and we might be able to win the game through endgame technique instead. Now, a question which is going to come up at some stages, do we actually flick in that h4? Well, that could potentially be possible at some stage to help fix a knight onto the f4 square in some lines, quite possibly. And of course, if you retain a light square bishop, it's always nice to put pawns on dark squares. So you get dark square controls from the pawns, light square controls from the bishops. So we're heading back here. So this is it, bishop c4. Yeah, so here we go. So Queen D2, let's try this here. Bishop B3 is another move, of course, which is another kind of waiting move, in which case if Black does commit themselves to Bishop G7, now we have Knight A5. This was actually the second game we did actually look at in the, people will be able to find it on YouTube, of course. So my questions, which people have asked, which hopefully you're starting to get to grips with now, is what to do if your opponent decides that they would like instead, oh yes, not to castle on the queen side, but just to castle on the king side. So for example, we had Queen D2. Let's try and see this fraction, and then Bishop H6, and let's see if we have a trade of these bishops. Yep, and Bishop E6. So here, what I was trying to work out is, and particularly with respect to the questions, what if White castles kingside and goes H3 and H4? Well, my first point is, why would White ever be interested in going H4 if they're going to castle on the king side? It doesn't make any sense at all, because that pawn obviously is only going to be a weakness here, really, rather than, it's not going to do anything useful on that square. Yep. We know why in general White plays H4, because they go H4, H5 to try and open up the H file in the Yugoslav attack. Okay, and they would undoubtedly have tried to do the same thing here if they could castle queenside, and they could go H4 and G4 if the black king has committed itself to castling kingside. One of the ideas of doing that king F8 to G7 maneuver, of course, is it kind of like inhibits that, because advancing these pawns when black has already got a rook on that file means that there's going to be weaknesses created elsewhere in the white position. So H4 I can't really see much purpose of, but of course we could have H3 played at some stage. But again, to play it here, you're kind of thinking, well, what would be the purpose at all of that move? You're not even really threatening to go G4, because takes the rook on H1 as a problem. So again, really, you're wondering about, well, how about, well, let's see, again, check, we go here, maybe castle kingside and doing H3 now. But again, there's not really that much purpose to that move.
Unless you probably castled yourself, but the king f8 is like that's theory, right?
Yeah, King F8. Well, I think in general, one of the main ideas is in this sort of position here, black has a choice. They can either just. I like the idea of Bishop E6, to be
Yeah,
honest, because it deprives White's bishop of that diagonal, which arguably is the best diagonal to go to, because this point might be a little bit tender now. You think we might be a little bit tender around here. But the alternative is to go A6, which cuts out that check altogether and then maybe prepares a little bit of an expansion later on in the
I see.
game. Yeah. So, but I'm quite happy with this whole King F8 maneuver.
I
But
like it
again,
so much too, yeah.
if we come back to it, so what I'm trying to say is I always do my best to answer any questions. But this move H3, for example, here, well, you might say, well, actually, there's some method in the madness now because White wants to go F4, F5. And of course, in going H3, that deprives the black knight of the G4 square. And obviously we could see how it could potentially embarrassing with a check along the long diagonal here and a knight on G4. But in general, what I'm actually saying is still getting these endgame situations are going to be fine for black. But the other thing is, how would we try to exploit that? So just briefly, I was looking at this. I mean, I wouldn't have imagined H3 as being a particularly good move, but the sort of things we're talking about is then, should we go H4 potentially to kind of take grips of this square here and maybe maneuver the knight around here? Could we even in something like this even think, you know what about G5? And suddenly you're starting to get a bit more excited about this position here. The idea being, of course, this pawn can't be taken because there's a little pin on the bishop here. And we might soon find our queen sitting in the middle. And then just maybe we could think about advancing those pawns a little bit later in the game. That might be absolutely possible. Or alternatively, you can just get on with doing rook c8, a6, rook c8, queen c5, king g7, swapping off the queens and doing a bit of queenside expansion work. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's all I've got for you, really. So the idea is I do like that. As I say, I like that rapport game where we got to get the bishop to f4 and the queen to h4. And if white goes g3, then obviously h4 is going to be a tempting item. And if white goes h3, as this, we might be able to go h4 to bind on the dark squares if possible. But I don't think h4 is really going to fit in with castle and kingside. And if it does, we can just still do all this business swapping off the queens with a6, queen c5, because generally I like a little bit of queenside play. And you can be aggressive by launching your pawns on the queen side of the board. It doesn't just have to be on the king side of the board. You're not going to suddenly want to clear the way, razz all these guys, your f pawn and your e pawn, and suddenly get your king exposed and look a bit like a lemon. So that's basically what I'm saying. Now, please, anybody watching, if we get any developments along this sort of lines, I promise you I will be keeping out for these H3, H4 ideas. But for me, what I was really saying is what I wrote in those original two videos, what I said in those videos, still is applicable if white tries to go H3 or H4, because it doesn't, as in England we say, it doesn't affect the price of milk.
That's what you say in England. Okay.
That's what we said. Have you got a similar phrase over there?
Yeah, we have the same, but with oat milk.
Oh, it's specifically oat milk, is it? Right.
No, we're not. We don't have anything like that in Germany.
You don't have anything. You're jealous, aren't you?
I'm a little bit, yeah.
Right. Okay, now let's switch back to the main game here because I want to do this. So, in fact, after h5 in this game, played, as you pointed out, appropriately in Budapest, we have bishop c4 and black played bishop d7. And as I've just explained to you a second ago, after the move queen d2, black has the chance to go knight takes d4 and bishop h6, just as Magnus Carlsen did in one of his games and got an absolutely fine position. So he's happy to play this system here.
Then
so in this game, white thought, oh no, I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to swap off the knight on c6.
I remember that Magnus game.
Yeah, you're excellent stuff. So, and we have now B takes C6. So now
Uh-huh.
there's pros and cons in what white has done. White now, queen can settle happily on this square here without being hassled by bishop H6. But of course, in having made this trade here, we have the pawn on this square, which means two things for black. The half open B file and the control over the D5 square that prevents a white knight from just parking itself there later. And after bishop G7, decision time for white. And of course, he's gone through all this because he wants to castle queenside, which might not, it might not impress the people that are requesting about. Yeah, but what do I do when the castle kingside and go h3 and h4? Well, you know what we'd do? We'd do a little bit of queenside expansion. We'd get our queen to a5, our rook to b8, maybe a5, a4 in this sort of position as well. And that's if castling kingside. And of course, we'd keep an eye out for breaking with d5. And certainly, by the way, if they castle kingside, we too could castle on the king side of the board. Yeah, no trying to maneuver that bishop to somewhere that doesn't exist just so they can go king f8 to g7. So, but we could do other moves. We could prioritize other moves. But here we get castles queenside. So now it should all flow. We know we're going to use the B file. We have queen a5. And yeah, so let's just talk about what's going on here. We're kind of scrutinizing this, but it's well protected by the knight and the bishop. We're planning to bring our rook to b8. This is the square which we most likely want to attack on. And we have the latent threats of the bishop along that dragon diagonal. Now, in this game, white played king b1. Now, you could say, well, what's the point in that move then?
Well, what's the point in that move then?
Right, that move usually, as in typically, and you should note this in your dragon games, Arna, that typically tries to bring into play the idea of going knight d5 at some stage.
Ah, yes.
Because that moves unleashes the queens and after challenges the queens, and after queen takes queen, there will be, of course, an intermezzo. Aha.
I remember.
Whatever you want to call it over there. The fact is that means an in-between move, such after queen takes queen, they might be able to go knight to something, something check and do something useful. Now, that's particularly more relevant when black has castled and there's the chance to go knight takes e7 check as an intermediary move, although not know if there's no way for the knight to escape, as might be the case with a pawn on c6, by the way. But that is the move we need to look out for. Black, of course, rook b8 anyhow, and now we're starting to get some potential fruitiness. In fact, is it fair to say, yes or no, Arna, that we are threatening knight takes e4 in this position?
Knight takes e4.
I tell you what I'm going to do, because obviously it's fair to say this white's go. Let's supposing white played our favorite move of the day, h3 for the time being,
Gotcha.
or h4. Are we threatening knight takes e4? Do you think? Stop the video. Not you. You have to stay here. And have a look and see for yourself. Do you think we're threatening knight takes e4?
So what could possibly go wrong if the knight doesn't take and the pawn takes? We take on c3 and that is game over. So if the knight would take and the bishop takes, then the queen is gone, but then we get the queen back. If we give, we give the, yes, is my answer.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting because yes is one thing you said, but some of your analysis didn't sound like it was heading in the direction of a yes.
No, I just calculated everything perfectly. Black will win a little piece here.
Oh, go on, talk us through it. This is brilliant. I feel like a proud teacher right now.
All right, so listen up, Chris. So we take on e4 with the knight.
Yep.
Now white has a couple of choices to make.
Let's say knight takes knight because the other one's duff. Yeah.
All right, so here we do not take with the rook with a check because
well, I was thinking we might.
We actually could, right? That is very convincing because a check means that the king has to move to c1.
Yeah.
And then can we not just take give a check on b1 with the rook
Well,
and
that would be a lovely way to deliver checkmate down the b file, were there not something like a
yeah,
bishop that could block on b3.
I
You
think
were thinking of rook b1 check, a queen on the b file
mhm,
check.
mhm, mhm.
Unfortunately, there's nowhere to check
No,
on the
then
b file with the queen
then
because
we
the
just go to a3 with the queen, and I think it's
that is what I'm looking for.
yeah.
So I'm looking at something like this, check, king here. I know what you were saying. It would have been lovely to do that if only we could find a check on the b file which wasn't covered by a white piece, and
Yeah.
b, they couldn't just block it with their bishop anyway. That's quite a lot of ifs. But of course, who needs that when you can just go here, and now we are talking, oh my word, we are talking checkmate city, whichever way you look at it here with those discovered checks. So that, I think the answer is definitely yes.
Mhm.
So we are threatening that. So in this particular game, White played bishop b3, no great surprise. They're offering a little bit of shield to the b file. And we played bishop e6, or Black played bishop
Mhm.
e6. Fine. And in this particular game, well, I think the idea is, obviously you're thinking, well, hang on, this is a bit tenuous. This is always a bit weak over here. But an actual fact, I've got a feeling if they play bishop takes e6 here, we could probably even do knight takes e4 anyhow. You can analyze that in your own time. But even just taking back, and then there's going to be a real problem with this covering the b2 square. So White played rook he1. So
I need to
this
ask.
move
Yeah, exactly. That was the
this
question.
move doesn't come anywhere now, because after Tia, there's just simply there's not really anything great to do. If we had knight takes, knight here, check, bishop takes, rook takes, this is only going to be happy for Black.
I see. I see.
Because I mean, again, we have this nice structure. This is fine.
That looks very good. Yeah.
Chance to do here. We've got pressure here, all that sort of thing. So it doesn't achieve anything in this particular move here. So White played rook he1 because he wanted to try and break in the center of the ball. No doubt he would like to get this move in. He would like to take here, expose all this central stuff for the time being. And Black played knight d7, opening up the dragon bishop. And this is where we got a little tactic. So the knight did come into here. Now, I actually think Black could. Well, I think they both made a couple of slight errors around here. I think here Black could have just swapped off the queens. White's obvious idea was to go knight here, check, and then take the bishop with check.
Yes.
And then recapture the queen.
Yeah.
But still, of course, the bishop on b3 is pinned.
Cannot move. Yeah.
So after c5, it's going to c4. And although White has the two bishops, I think there's still quite a lot of play that Black can have. So I think that would have been nothing special. But instead, after knight d5, Black dropped the queen back to d8 as if to say, well, what have you really achieved by moving your knight there? Your knight is now under attack. Where's it going to go to? Now, probably, I think here, the knight should have gone to this square here, b4. I don't think it's particularly that many great shakes, but it probably should have done, it should have moved away and somewhere better than where it's come from, c3, of course. But instead, White tried to get a little bit fruity, and they played bishop g5. Now, what is their justification for getting fruity, do you think? Well, they're trying to get the rook and the bishop pounding down on that e7 square. Well, obviously, immediately the knight's involved in the action. But I think White's made a bit of a poor judgment call here. And this is underestimating just how good Black's pieces can be in the Sicilian Dragon, and overestimating how powerful a solitary white queen can be. Let me show you. So after bishop g5, we had pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. So as you can see, the bishop now moved away. White has sacrificed a piece, but has a bit of pressure here. And of course they take, but the piece count is massing. And we already see, if we do some maths, we see that currently Black has a rook and two minor pieces for a queen. This bishop here is blocking some action against b2, but it's not doing that much other than that. Temporarily, though, a check on the e-file is a little bit awkward because we have got to move our king to where we might not have wanted it to go to. Let's keep going. Rook e1. Let's just point out a couple of things. If white had gone g4, which they would very much have liked to, possibly, this is what they were thinking about. We have again another little intermezzo, rook e8. The problem being that the
Oh,
bishop is going to now have the option, one of these two options available to it. So instead, white played rook e1. And now the bishop came out to e5, a move no doubt you're going to like because it facilitates the chance to go king g7 that would connect our rooks along the back. White played h4 here. Were we really going to take that pawn? I'm not sure that was a priority, but white
nah.
played pawn to h4. Again, let's see why but now, okay, sorry. We know why white played h4. I do now because white would have liked to have gone g4, I guess, but takes. Next time we have rook takes h2. So h4
Ah,
was played, sorry, primarily
I
to
see.
threaten the move g4 next go.
I see. So black has to move the knight away now, I think. Otherwise, the white squared bishop is in trouble or not?
Well, no, we found an alternative solution.
Oh,
Rook b4.
that is a
Simply bringing the rook into action,
interesting
controlling
move.
this square here.
Good move, yeah.
Yeah, so that is a problem. And white played king a1. Why would they do such a thing? Presumably to unpin this pawn here, to free it up to move. But of course, this pawn is now pinned. Not that that was going anywhere anytime soon. And now the black knight strikes into the... I think there's other good moves here. I think we could have just brought our king up to g7. And I'm not sure. I
Yeah,
think probably we could have just guzzled that pawn.
true.
But there's
It's just hanging.
something nice about bringing that knight into the action as well. Knight c5. Then we have queen f2. So white, and this is the problem, white's not really got any obvious breakthroughs to get through these black pieces now. And the king is absolutely as safe. The black king is absolutely safe now. However, as you've probably spotted, there is a way to take advantage of a little bit of overloading here, or is there? No. Rook takes e5 was played. I think the problem is there's just nothing else for white to do. I mean, this
Yeah,
bishop here, pretty useless. He made that sacrifice, but the queen, no way to get at the king. So rook takes e5. Obviously, we can all see this isn't really the case, but the whole point is, of course, there's another intermezzo
yeah.
coming our way with knight takes b3 check, a takes b3, and d takes e5. Now let's stop for a second. That count has now gone up to 2 rooks and a bishop for the queen. However, white does have a little preponderance of pawns that he might, if he could get them down the board, could potentially be some new queens or something, but that is to be optimistic to say the least. Queen e1 at least is a fork, as we can see.
Ah,
Rook hba, but it's not. Black isn't really too worried about the pawn count right now. The king is absolutely super safe, and we are going to go on the attack ourselves soon, just with 2 rooks and a bishop. So queen c7. Okay, let's talk about that. That's the a pawn, which is under threat. Rook b7 for the time. Queen c6. We're doing a little bit of toing and froing. Rook here, queen here, and now nice move. Rook c8.
oh,
Because we would like very much to win that pawn here, because then the king is going to be in a bit of a pickle, as we do find out.
terribly, yeah.
a7. And now, okay, so there's a couple of moves. The move which was played in this game was actually pretty impressive, but let me show you what he could have done, which would have been super duper nice, would have been, of course, simply bishop takes c2. Because the rook on b6 is not really on b6 because of rook a8 check.
That is beautiful.
That would have been a nice move. Instead, rook b8 was played with a couple of other threats, one being a little side shuffle to a8 to pin the queen to the king, and the other, of course, being to attack this pawn. In fact, what happened here was king b1, and then rubbing white's nose in it now, it's rook takes c2. Oh, man, that's got to hurt. Queen takes rook check will be met by rook to c8 check, winning the queen. There's about 50 billion discovered checks, which are going to cause all sorts of problems here. The white queen is challenged to find a square that he can move to where the rook won't be able to give a discovered check. And let's just say it's not going to look nice. It's not going to be pretty with those discovered checks all coming around. So yeah. So in this position, actually, white resigned. Yeah. Nice, simple
That's a
game.
good move. Yeah.
So I hope that we've been able to cover first and foremost some of the questions regarding how we attack, and that falls in line with the question you asked about how you attack against the classical. Is a case sometimes of just queenside play, getting the queens off and queenside play. It doesn't mean we chicken. It just means we're going to be able to launch a bit easier with that and not have to worry about anything on the king side ourselves. And this in itself was quite a cute little game here. I'm not sure we're going to see too many people now try knight takes c6, but white is exhausting the options against the Hungarian Dragon, which still seems to be pretty popular right now.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris. Very, very informative. Also, how you explained all the things around it. You are truly a dragon tamer. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, we will see each other soon enough for another monthly dragon. Bye bye.